Michella Chester with Adam Kramer, a senior college football writer at Bleacher Report. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to preview the national title matchup between Georgia and TCU, two Heisman finalist quarterbacks, and a matchup we probably never would have expected. Adam, what do you think?
For sure. Yeah, what TCU is doing is not normal, right? I think Georgia you could have seen even with all the departures to the draft, but TCU unranked in the AP poll to start the year. This is not what we're accustomed to seeing. The playoff has been pretty top heavy. We've seen a lot of Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson. So when a Cincinnati has gotten in, or a Washington or a Michigan State, it's been one and done. The fact that we have a team, some fresh face in there, I think it's great for college football, and the way TCU has played all year, just this unbelievably chaotic style to come from behind wins. It's a wonderful way to cap off the football season.
All right, so let's start with that TCU-Michigan matchup. A lot of people heavily favored Michigan going in. TCU stuns them in what was an offensive slugfest. What did you take away from that matchup now as TCU heads into the title game?
Yeah, I was one of them because I thought physically, I wasn't sure that TCU would be able to hold up. I thought the offensive line played great. I thought that was a big part of this against Michigan. How are they going to protect Max Duggan long enough to make plays? And then when they didn't, Max Duggan was magical, like he's been all year. So the part of this that I think was just most surprising is tackles behind the line of scrimmage for TCU, disruptive plays. Like they looked like they belonged for Michigan, and that may sound a little odd. They've made it this far. Of course they should belong, but these two teams are recruiting two different types of football players. Let's be honest here. And the fact that TCU was able to hold up, to create enough huge plays. What a game, by the way. We have to interject, like, what a football game, and we could say that about both semis. I thought that TCU, to me, fit and looked like one of these teams that has been recruiting top 10 recruiting class over the last 4 to 5 years. That's not who they are. They've got some great individual players, obviously, on both sides of the ball, but I just thought the collective effort from them was truly unbelievable.
Then, like you mentioned, we almost had two upsets, but Georgia just barely survives a huge comeback, take a 1-point lead, and then not Michigan, of course, Ohio State misses the game-winning field goal. I was at that game. The Dogs were not looking their best, but they still won, Adam. How do you see, or do you see them improving heading into the title game?
I do. I thought the reaction from Kirby Smart essentially saying that Ohio State should have won. You don't hear coaches say that after games, and I thought that was really telling. And just as the collective faces from him and Stetson Bennett, it was like one of complete shock. So for Georgia, yeah, defensively, they've been exposed a little bit. And go back to the SEC championship game. They were up big. LSU threw for 500 plus yards in that game. And I've thought about that result a lot since. And we thought, okay, well, maybe Georgia was up so big, it didn't matter. LSU had to throw. But then you look at some of the holes in the secondary and the way that Ohio State was moving the ball at times pretty easily. It was a surprise, and yet I think these are things that Georgia can fix. Your secondary is not going to automatically improve, but there's ways that you can address it, both offensively and defensively, as strange as that sounds. And obviously they have the personnel to do it. If any team is equipped to like really rally over the course of 9 days, this is the one. This is why you do recruit the number one classes in the country or number 2 classes consistently over 5 years. That's what they've done. I would be shocked if we get another performance like the one we saw.
What can you say about that comeback from Stetson Bennett? I mean, he was looking so out of sorts early on in that game, and then somehow garnered the confidence to get the win.
Yeah, and early was pretty good, right? It was like an odd performance sandwich. Like early great, and then there was a 15 to 20 minute stretch where he had the screen pass that looked like behind the line of scrimmage. Everything just looked out of sorts. And I don't think it's any secret. You get Brock Bowers involved, things are going to probably go a little bit better for you. They didn't run the ball a ton either. I don't think that's Georgia's game plan, like to put it squarely on Bennett's shoulders. But he did respond. He almost threw for 400 yards. He scored 4 touchdowns. He has been put in this position before. I mentioned the faces after the game. His was probably the most telling in trying to get an interview out of him. And this is a guy that's been in a lot of big games now, was kind of in awe, sort of speechless about it. I don't know what happened during that stretch other than I think Georgia got punched in the mouth the way that they haven't really been punched in the mouth this year. Maybe Missouri, but different stakes, different everything else. I think that he this is a guy that we saw similar last year in the championship game. Did not play a great first half. Heck, I thought he might be benched and then came out and obviously won a national title and responded. So the resiliency of him and his story, everything else, obviously, is significant and a huge part of Georgia's DNA.
So I want to talk about a matchup here. CJ Stroud had the game of his life. It was mentioned before the game that in order to beat Georgia, he was going to have to get out of the pocket, use his feet more, which he didn't always do all season long, but that's exactly what he did against UGA. He was just picking that secondary apart, finding Harrison Jr. down the field play after play. Now the Dogs have Max Duggan, who does exactly that. So how do you see that matchup playing out?
Yeah, Stroud, I thought some of his best work was kind of gliding within the pocket. And then, when he had to make a play, even at the end of the game, was really, really good. This is really Duggan's, well, he's very good at so many things, but I think this is his most amazing trait, which is to extend plays. And when you blitz him, is to move around. And if you cannot corral him, it's not going to go well for you. It's not. We've seen it in the Big 12 championship game. We saw it last week. I think there's going to be an allure to send pressure for Georgia if they can't get pressure with their front four. But if they do that and they blitz, Michigan knows this pain, right? Not just extending plays and then using his arm, but running as well. So I do think this is what makes Max Duggan so good, is his elusiveness. And it's a trait that we've seen teams really use to their success. Look at Utah in the Rose Bowl with Cam Rising before and after he got injured, before he got hurt. It was incredible to watch him work. Quarterbacks that can use your feet the way that he did and the way that Duggan do, it's such a tremendous asset. And regardless of the stars and the recruiting prowess and the athletes, it's a tough thing for Georgia to counter. You just got to get it done, and you've got to try to corral him. It's easier said than done, obviously. We've gone through a full season, and no one really seems to have done it yet.
And then, obviously, there wasn't a whole lot of defense in the TCU-Michigan matchup, but if Georgia's able to clean up their offense, maybe get Bowers more involved, how do you see the UGA offense sizing up against the Horned Frogs D?
I really think that you're going to see a different game plan. You and I talked before starting this, in just that, why not run the ball more? McIntosh with 5 carries, right? I know they like to throw it to their running backs, which is an extension of the run game, but I really think that if Kirby Smart is smart, and he clearly very well is, go back to your Nick Saban roots here and do kind of the BOA restrictor football thing. Run the football. Exhaust TCU that way. You don't want to get in these trading touchdown moments like Michigan did. That is not the formula for success. It's not the formula for success for Georgia against Ohio State either. This formula is run the football and wear this team down. And you could say all these different advantages at positions, right? You know that TCU's wide receivers could give Georgia's secondary a problem. You really don't want to give them a chance to do it. I really think this is more ball control, and this is kind of vintage Alabama, vintage Georgia than it would be you want Stetson Bennett to throw for 400 yards. That's not their blueprint. Their blueprint is not force him into having to make those things and control the tempo and the game plan from the start. If I'm Georgia or coaching this team, and thank goodness I'm certainly not, that's what I would do, because you've got a great tight ends, depending on the injuries. You've got some great wide receivers that can change the game for you that we saw in this. You don't necessarily need to use that from the start. You can have some big plays, but really it's keeping the ball on your side and not giving the ball to Duggan and all these great players that they have.
And you think if Georgia does execute that, it'll come out in their favor?
I do. Yeah, I do. Both of these games, you never know how the tempo of the game is going to go. And both of these immediately we're like, okay, well, these are going to be exciting football games. Very good news for us as fans just to watch, because it was the best day of semifinals that we've ever had. But I think that is it sounds like a broken record in terms of the physicality and the size and everything else. But Georgia is truly special in the sense that there are very few teams from just size, makeup that can match up to them. TCU did respond to Michigan impressively. I think ultimately it's going to be hard to do again. I also wonder, just openly, for both of these teams, how much did they exhaust physically and emotionally from these two games? It may seem odd to say, is this like a letdown in the championship? It won't be a letdown, but nervous energy and just pure exhaustion based on what we just saw, who would that impact more? It's a great question, but it certainly could have an impact on both sides.
Absolutely. So you just touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to have you break it down.
Yeah.
TCU will win if, and Georgia will win if. What needs to happen?
For sure. For TCU, I think the formula is going to be pretty simple, is allow Max Duggan to create. You and I have kind of already talked about it. That is the coal that drives the train, in that your quarterback is going to have time to make plays, and you're going to have to keep him upright. And I think ultimately it really does rely, so much of this game, in my opinion, relies on the offensive line, right? It's can they protect and allow their quarterbacks to do their job, or allow their running backs to move? But to me specifically, it's you don't want Duggan taking shots, and you've got some questionable injuries at running back as well for TCU, which is going to be a big story in this game. So there's an even greater emphasis, we think, on Duggan and pass protection. I think TCU, if they protect him and allow him just enough time, he doesn't need a lot. We saw that against Michigan. Some huge plays, run after catch, if they just allowed him to kind of just flick the ball out here to the flats. So I think the key for them is going to be, yes, protect Max Duggan and make sure that you give him a chance to make plays.
All right, and lastly, Adam, your national title prediction.
I think it's going to be Georgia, and I think Georgia's going to win by double digits. I'd love to see a great game. I'd love to see a really good game, because this has been a season of great games. Semifinals were great games. And TCU, by the way, would be one of the greatest stories in the history of college football. I am not one to just bask in hyperbole, but I think it's legitimate. Like, we do not see this type of thing happen. And if you're a team in a conference, a Power 5 conference, that's looking for hope and a blueprint, like, this is a blueprint to be successful. So I'd love to see TCU do it. But I do think Georgia just played its worst game of the year and still beat, in my opinion, a top 4 team. And that's pretty remarkable when you think about it. And also, it's even more remarkable when you think about you and I talking a year ago, just how different this Georgia team was, right? It's like vastly superior. Not a knock on this team. So much talent lost. I just think this Georgia team feels right for this matchup. I think the game plan is going to be different. I think you're going to see a much different effort. And yes, I think the experience from playing a year ago for a lot of these players, and coaches for that matter, helps a great deal.
And possibly a really great bounce back, too, after what you said was their worst game. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you breaking it down, and really excited for the national championship.
Of course, thank you.